On the last episode of Menace, the Ken story, Ken got out of jail and went to find Shalonda. For the first time in their relationship, they were able to date freely. Everything was fine until Ken visited Shalonda and caught a glimpse of her in the company of Sharon and Antonio. He began to feel that they may have been in a position to have some influence over her, and he didn't like it. So he decided that she should live with him. Shalonda agreed. All was well until an unexpected trip with Rob caused a delay in Ken and Shalonda's schedule. After an argument with Rob and a subsequent decision to drink and do cocaine, Ken became violent with Shalonda for the second time. And now, Chapter 19, Suffer. I started using cocaine regularly after that point. Not like every day, but a few times a week. I know that sounds crazy, considering what I had done the first 2 times, but I was under a lot of pressure. Rob was treating me like I was grown, so he wasn't taking any slack off of me with the business. I had a lot of responsibility at home, too. I had gotten Shalonda to quit her job at the salon, so I knew I had to step up. There was nothing waiting for her if I failed to come through. Besides, I was managing it well. Well, I thought I was. For the most part, I was a good time when I was high. I was fun, the life of the party. And because of that, I felt like those 2 outbursts were random flukes. What I didn't realize was cocaine had a weird effect on me. It tended to amplify whatever feeling I had at the time. If I was happy, it made me a happier person. But if I was already feeling some kind of way, that cocaine played all around in my head. I didn't really know that at the time, and that was unfortunate. Labor Day. Under any other circumstances, I probably would have been kicking it with the crew, but everything had changed. Rob had killed Lorenzo. Mac was working for Tony. I felt some kind of way about Rob, so we were shaky, at best. Hot Boy didn't care for Adrian, so he wasn't around as much. And I decided that I agreed with Hot Boy. After being around Adrian, I didn't really like him that much either, brother or not. And then there was Shalonda. She was there with me, and I was there with her. It was a holiday, so we decided to throw a little party at the house. It was cool. We spent the first part of that day getting things together, and I saw us that day. Shalonda was cooking and singing. I was making store runs and putting things together. I thought about Ma and Pops a lot that day while I was interacting with Shalonda. This is how it's supposed to be, I thought. In my mind, Shalonda was going to have my children, and they were going to see that. They were going to see their parents cooking and laughing together. They were going to see love. Our lives had finally aligned, and that's how it was going to be all the time. But it wasn't. It wasn't even that way for the rest of the night. We continued the party, and we were having a good time. I was drinking a little, and I decided to snort some cocaine. I dipped into the bathroom and forgot to lock the door. Of all people to walk in on me, it had to be Hot Boy. Of course, he wanted to be Rob Jr. and give me a lecture that I wasn't in the mood for. I knew what I was doing. I made enough money to cover the little bit of coke that I was using. I didn't need Hot Boy to tell me how to manage. But that wasn't even the worst part. He ended the conversation by saying, "Look, man, what you do is your business, and I ain't gonna get into all that. But be careful. Don't let that stuff take over you. And don't worry about it. I ain't gonna say nothing to Rob." I ain't gonna say nothing to Rob? Why was everybody acting like we had to run our decisions by Rob? Before I knew it, I said, "What's wrong with you? After what he did to your mom, you really care what Rob thinks? After everything you know, you still care what Rob thinks? Man, forget Rob." I left Hot Boy standing in the bathroom, and I felt like we weren't going to be the same. I had said too much, but I couldn't help it. By that point, I was ready for the party to be over. Mostly everybody had left, and I was basically getting rid of the stragglers. I was really ready to kick everybody out so me and Shalonda could be alone. But then I walked past the kitchen. Of all the things for me to see while I was drunk, high, and angry, I saw Omar walking out of the kitchen where Shalonda was. Omar, the same Omar that had failed to give Shalonda that letter when I was in juvie. The same Omar that I was convinced had been trying to get at Shalonda when I was locked up. Me and Omar had some words outside. Present day, I don't think it was true. But he basically said that he could have had Shalonda if he wanted her. It escalated, and he pulled out a gun. Omar, my boy from when we were little. Omar, the friend that had gotten caught breaking into an abandoned building with me when we were kids. Omar pulled a gun out on me, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. I saw Kenny's death flash before my eyes. Omar got into his car, and I knew that we would never be okay again. A part of me was bothered by that. Even though I felt some kind of way about Omar, that felt like it went too far. If we had fought, I could have handled it. But that, we couldn't come back from him pulling a gun out on me. Not after what happened to Kenny. I went back into the house, and I was mad. I was mad at everything. I was mad that I had let things get out of control with Hot Boy. I was mad that things had gone too far with Omar. And I was mad that Shalonda had entertained it. Why had she entertained him? In my mind, all she had to do was stay out of his face, and everything would have been avoided. I went into the kitchen and asked Shalonda if she thought I was stupid. She just stood there looking at me, and that made me even madder. I honestly just blacked out, and I started hitting her. I was so angry. When I calmed down, I realized that Shalonda was on the floor. She was sobbing, and I saw that I had really hurt her. But weirdly enough, I wasn't bothered like I had been the times before. I was still mad. I left to take a walk, feeling like I needed to put some distance between us. Shalonda was in bed when I got home. I didn't go into the bedroom. I slept on the couch. Shalonda was supposed to start her senior year of high school that next day. She didn't go to school that day. She didn't go to school for several days afterwards. And after that, cocaine and fighting became a regular part of my life with her. I'd sometimes watch Shalonda. She no longer smiled and sang while she cooked. I saw something in her eyes, and I recognized it. It was sadness. It was the same look she sometimes had when we were at her spot in the woods. It was the look she'd had that made me wonder what her life was like at home. And then it occurred to me, dang, are we turning into mom and pops? It went on that way for like 6 months. And then it happened. Shalonda left for school that morning, and I went on to do my regular thing. I went to Rob's to drop off some money, and then I went to the mall to do some shopping for me and Shalonda. When I was done, I headed home. The second I stepped inside, there was a knock at the door. It was the knock. The knock people in my situation never want to hear. It was the police. Weirdly enough, they didn't step inside, and they didn't ask to search the house. They calmly asked me to step outside, and I did. "Are you Ken Matthews?" they asked. "Yes," I said. They told me that they had warrants for my arrest. "What are the charges?" I asked. Around that same time, Shalonda was pulling up. She walked onto the porch as they were explaining everything. And that's what really stung. They said, "You have several charges related to drug distribution, but also a probation violation stemming from a failure to complete a mandatory anger management program. We've been unable to catch up with you prior to this point, but when your girlfriend called asking for a police escort to get her things out the house, we figured we might catch up to you this time." The officer turned to Shalonda and joked that she could probably cash in on a reward for turning me in. I looked in her face, and I could see that she was about to cry. I thought back to the promise that we made in the woods that day, and I wanted to make sure that she remembered it too. I reminded Shalonda that she promised to always love and protect me, yet she had led the police right to me. I mean, they could have picked me up at any time. In spite of what the officer said, they obviously knew where I lived. They had picked me up from that same house when I got arrested for beating up Shalonda's stepdad. But that still didn't change the fact that she had bought them there. How could we come back from that? In my mind, we couldn't. So there I was, locked up again. But that time, it wasn't juvie, and it wasn't a first-time assault charge. In the eyes of the law, I was a seasoned criminal. When I went to court, they did everything they did the time before. They went through my school records, my history of violence, etc. But that time, they were able to add the additional drug charges and the fact that I obviously had a history of being non-compliant due to the fact that I hadn't completed the anger management program. The judge gave me a chance to speak. My lawyer told me that I might be able to sway him by expressing the fact that life had been difficult for me. My family wasn't like the Cosbys. I didn't have the opportunities that a lot of other people had. I had to get it from the mud. I had to fight for every single thing I had. So I decided to fight that day too. I stepped up to the podium and addressed the judge. I said, "Your Honor, life ain't ever been easy for me. And the fact that I was hard-headed probably didn't help. From the outside looking in, it's easy to say that I should have made different decisions. And maybe I should have. But this is something that a lot of people don't realize. You don't always choose your life. Sometimes your life chooses you. I haven't always made the best decisions, but I'm not a bad guy. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can be better, because I know I can." When it was all said and done, that speech ain't do nothing. The judge gave me 6 years. But I wasn't going to the county lockup like I did when I caught that assault charge. I was going to state prison. Prison was a different beast. County jail was full of guys who were either serving a year or less, waiting to go to court, or waiting to go to prison. The time was spent playing cards or just kicking it. But prison felt final. No one was waiting to go to court or waiting that year out. There was no hope. Everyone in prison knew where they stood, and they had nothing to look forward to. My time there was especially bothersome in the beginning because I was all alone. Both of my parents were also in prison, and I didn't really have any other family. I was on the outs with Rob and Hot Boy, so I knew they wouldn't visit either. And I was in a strange place with Shalonda. In the beginning, a part of me was hoping that she would pop up like she did when I was in county. I knew that wouldn't happen, though. It was different. No one could just pop up when you were in prison. There were forms and approvals. A part of me was angry that she had called the police. The other part of me still loved her and wanted to see her. But the more time that I spent without hearing from Shalonda, the madder I became. She didn't even try to reach out to me, not even to explain. Being honest, that kind of hurt. I thought back to the conversation that I had with Sebastian in juvie. He told me to tell Ma to stop coming if it was going to make me cry. I finally understood it. Prison was no place to cry. Whatever I had with Shalonda was over. Thinking about it would only make me weak in there. In fact, it was easier to hate her. That way, there was no expectation that she would be checking for me. In fact, I didn't want her to check for me. I hated her. I went on that way for a while. I was mad at everyone and everything. It wasn't really about Shalonda. I guess her betrayal was just the last thing on a long list of things that had gone wrong in my life, so I focused on that. 2 years into my sentence, I got moved into another building. I had gotten into a fight with another inmate, so they transferred me after I got out of the hole. The thing about prison is, everything is geared towards letting you know how bad you messed up. Before that fight, I was in Building 2. Building 2 was more of a lower level that was reserved for inmates that didn't cause too much trouble. You could attend classes and group meetings in Building 2, and you could see Building 1 from there. It gave you something to work towards. Building 1 inmates were either trusted to stay completely trouble-free or they were about to go home. They were nearly free over there. It was more like a campus opposed to a prison. But I got moved to Building 3 after the fight. Building 3 was reserved for the worst offenders, and it was terrible. Everything over there was meant to be the hardest and the most complicated. We stayed locked in our cells more than anything. All of the inmates over there were hardened criminals. I didn't belong over there. I got locked up because I had sold drugs. I didn't go to anger management after I beat up Shalonda's stepdad, so I caught a violation for that. But I wasn't on the same level as those dudes. I got put in a cell with Casper. They called him Casper because he was like a ghost. He stayed out of the way and the other inmates barely saw him. Casper was an older dude that killed his wife and her lover after he caught them together. But it wasn't just a murder. I heard he stabbed both of them to death at the same time. Do you know how much anger you have to stab 2 people to death at the same time? That's not like shooting somebody from across a room. Stabbing is personal. Casper had been in prison for like 20 years at that point, and he wasn't ever getting out. When I first got into the cell with Casper, I felt the same way that I felt when I got assigned to that room with Sebastian. In my mind, I thought, this is what they're doing to me? I ain't saying what I did was right, but I ain't that dude. I ain't stabbed 2 people to death. I didn't belong there. I wasn't on that level of menace. But the crazy things happen when you have to serve time. I was in my early 20s, and Casper had me by at least 30 years. In a real life situation, I can't imagine that we would ever have found ourselves in each other's company. But being stuck in a cell together, we began to share the details of our lives. Eventually, I began to open up about everything that I had gone through. I talked to Casper about Ma and Pops, Kenny, Rob, Hot Boy, and Shalonda. One day, Casper asked me why I was so mad with her. I didn't even have to think about it. The answer was simple. It had been playing out in my head for over 2 years at that point. Rob was right. There are some things that you just don't do, and calling the cops is one of them. There were so many different ways that she could have gone about that, and she chose to bring the people to my doorstep. I'm going to hate her forever for that. Casper looked at me, and you would have thought I had 3 heads. He said something that I took with me for years. He said, "Are you serious? First of all, you don't hate that girl. Her name has come up too many times. But if that's the story you want to tell, I'm not going to stop you from telling it. Otherwise, let me tell you something. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I'm going to be in prison forever because of them. Being in here has taught me a thing or two. The biggest lesson has been to understand the part that I've played in other people's suffering. I ain't going to say that I made my wife cheat. She didn't have to do that. But I am going to say that I didn't make it easy for her to want to be with me. I wasn't the husband that she needed me to be, and I now understand what made her need something else. But in the heat of the moment, all I wanted to do was make her suffer. I killed him and I made her watch. She had to see it and feel like she caused it. Then I killed her, and I really made her suffer. It took me a long time to realize that I'm only responsible for myself. I never had the right to make her suffer while we were together. I never had the right to make her suffer in death. My only responsibility was to make her happy or to leave. That's it. I ruined a lot of lives because I didn't understand that. Now, we've talked a lot, and you've told me about your life. You didn't grow up in the most stable situation. You grew up watching your pops beat on your mom. You had to find a way to deal with that. And you met somebody that was dealing with her own things. Y'all became a safe place for each other. Do you understand that you took that safety away when you started putting your hands on her? That safety wasn't yours to take away. And now you're mad with her because she tried to find a way to be okay after you made her suffer? That girl loves you. You ain't in here because of her. She didn't press charges on you for hitting her. She called the police because she wanted to leave safely. If you found her right now, you could probably get her back. And as mad as you say you are, I know you want her. I know you do because you nearly cry every time you talk about her. But I'm asking you not to do that. Leave that girl alone. Leave her alone and let her heal. Let her be safe. Stay away from her until you can give her what she needs. Do your anger management program. Get some kind of certification so you can get a decent job on the outside. Go to a treatment program so you can learn how to cope without drugs and alcohol. Don't bother that girl until you can go to her with all of that fixed. Because if you do, all you're going to do is make her suffer. How can you love her if you hurt her like that? When I thought about it, I knew he was right. I did hurt Shalonda, and I did make her feel unsafe. And as much as I hated to admit it, Casper was right when he said I still loved her. I would never feel okay about that whole calling the law thing, and Casper couldn't talk me out of that one. But everything hit me differently when I thought about the fact that she was probably suffering. She was suffering, and I had been the cause of that. I thought about everything. I had shared some really good times with Shalonda, and none of that could just go away. At so many points in time, Shalonda was my safe place, and I was that for her. When my life was chaotic, she was the only thing that felt good and innocent. Everything else was a mess, but life was just right when I was with her. Casper was right about something else too. I had hurt Shalonda so many times, and I had always been able to slide back in. Maybe I could that time too, but did she really deserve that? The answer was no, not like that. I love Shalonda. I fell in love with my best friend. That was real and honest. My actions were messed up, but when it came to matters of the heart, I didn't think that there was anyone that could actually love her more than I did. But she deserved a life where the love and the actions could align. With that in mind, I decided that I would forget about Shalonda until I could give her the life that she deserved, because I didn't want to see her suffer. I couldn't possibly have known how long it would be until I saw her again, and I didn't know that the situation would be anything but good and innocent. But for the moment, Shalonda and I were over. And for as much as I said I hated her, I was suffering behind that. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to follow Shinny Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to purchase books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on ebook, in paperback, and some in hardback formats. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends, family, and frenemies, because all relationships matter, even the toxic ones. Thanks so much for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.